In 1927, the last year before sound changed movies forever, the silent film reached its zenith with one picture, Sunrise. Watching Sunrise today, it's easy to take much of what made it exceptional for granted. Moving camera, dramatic lighting, special effects, these are all techniques we've become desensitized to. But if anything, that's why I appreciate this movie even more, not only for its power, but its novelty. F.W. Murnau was a German director who was called to Hollywood off of the success of another one of his films, The Last Laugh, a film that managed to tell its story with the use of only one title card in the whole picture. According to Murnau, the ideal film does not need titles. Murnau knew that cinema was first and foremost a visual medium, and he spent his career pushing that belief to the forefront of his work. With Sunrise, his first American movie, he gave us something only the greatest silent films can give: a universal story. And it's a story as old as fairy tales. A man is tempted by a woman from the city to leave his wife and go away with her. It's as simple as that. A fable about love, weakness, and ultimately, redemption. Murnau and his screenwriter Carl Mayer were so keen on keeping the characters and world as general as possible that they don't even give them names. The man is the man, the woman is the woman, and the wife, the wife. This leaves the only things for us as the audience to identify with as the faces of the actors and the way the camera captures them on screen. Silent films were suited for broad emotions, like fear or a blind drive for murder. In this scene, the man, still under the spell of the city woman, aims to drown his wife and stage the murder as an accident. Look to the physicality of Janet Gaynor and George O'Brien here. There's no need for dialogue. Their bodies tell us all we need to know. Yet even in a scene of such broad emotion, Murnau's careful touch as a filmmaker makes us believe every gesture so that we can't look away. Janet Gaynor, who won the Oscar for her performance, plays the innocent country wife with such genuine liveliness that I buy every tear she sheds. The film itself is appropriately subtitled A Song of Two Humans because that's really how it plays out. It's less about the plot of a man who tries to kill his wife, and more about the push and pull of feeling between these two characters. In a way, the initial conflict is resolved in the first third of the picture. After the man comes to his senses and begs for his wife's forgiveness, There's still an hour left. We watch as they battle the forces that try to separate them, whether they're internal or external. Murnau was a perfectionist. He involved himself in every aspect of production: writing, set design, lighting. If something wasn't working or hadn't been done before, he'd work tirelessly along with the rest of his crew on set until it was figured out. And at the time, this was the case more often than not. Film was still a relatively new medium, and the technology hadn't caught up to some of its aspirations. Cameras could be picked up and moved, but with the cameraman practically bolted to its side in order to crank the reel, tracking shots like this were incredibly difficult. Turns out rails were mounted to the studio ceiling to give the impression of a floating camera, but it's not just the freedom of the movement that makes this shot so powerful. It's the dark shadows, the fog hovering above the marshes, the perfectly round moon in the distance. This is what the Germans referred to as Stimmung, a stylized atmosphere which, coming from the country that birthed Expressionism, was highly praised. Murnau's great achievement as a storyteller was his ability to mold the medium to suit his own vision. He was as much obsessed with the technical properties of film as he was with directing. Sets were built using forced perspective to give the impression that they were larger than life. Models of trains ran in the foreground, while double exposures of matte paintings expanded the world beyond what was physically possible. He even dressed children as adults to really sell the scale of this fictional city. Of course, all this came at an expense. William Fox, the man who brought Murnau to Hollywood, gave him full control to make whatever picture he wanted. In one scene towards the end, the city is swept up by a storm. The effect was supposed to be a huge gust of wind that would lift the dust and people off the ground, followed by heavy rain, but either due to human or machine error, the water went too soon and the first part was missed. Murnau paused production until the set was dry so they could reshoot the scene. It took 3 days, and a lot of money. This was a level of freedom very few filmmakers had ever enjoyed, and a luxury Murnau would never experience with a studio again. It was only on his last film, a film he financed almost entirely independently, that Murnau was able to regain some of the control he felt he'd lost. After a few more years under Fox, Murnau was feeling restrained by the studio system. He ended his contract and traveled to Tahiti, where he and Robert Flaherty planned to make their next picture. Production was far from smooth sailing. Financing fell apart, crew had to be sent home, Flaherty and Murnau were in constant disagreement, but in the end, the film speaks for itself. Like Sunrise, the story of Taboo feels timeless. A young couple is torn apart by the rituals of their island. The girl is chosen to replace the chief's maiden, making her taboo. No man can even look at her with desire, or they'll be put to death. When the boy rescues the girl and they escape, a curse follows them. It's the classic tale of lover's tragedy. Gone are the sets and studio lights of Sunrise. Every frame is filled with the authenticity of its setting. Almost all of the actors and workers behind the camera were locals to the island. Instead of the floating tracking shot, the camera is steady as a rock. Murnau replaced the heightened artificiality of Hollywood with the soft reality of nature. Yet his precision as a filmmaker doesn't go away. Light and shadow are as important as ever. This dream scene, which was carefully planned and shot listed beforehand, uses a sequence of shots to reveal a character's inner conflict. Just like the vision of the city in the marshes of Sunrise, the scene tells a story in itself. Taboo was released in 1931, so at this point, sound was all the craze. Spoken dialogue was making audiences flock to the theater. But for Murnau, story was king, and if he could do it without dialogue, he would. Although both Sunrise and Taboo are technically silent films, they use sound and music for a very specific dramatic effect. A synchronized score was created to support the action on screen. We are told how to feel not literally by words, but emotionally, by the pairing of audio and image. This was what we lost when talking pictures took over the medium, a sense of universal connection, the craft of purely visual storytelling. And I think Sunrise embodies that lost art more than any other film I've seen. It's what Murnau and the great silent films are able to do, hypnotize us into believing in another world. They're like waking dreams. And for that hour and a half or so, it's a dream that we don't want to wake from.